because the story they thought they were part of was never theirs to begin with. You are no longer addicted to being understood. You don't flinch at misinterpretation. You let them misread you, mislabel you, speak on your behalf. Because every word they speak, without your consent, is a confession, a reflection of their projection. You let them cast shadows on your silence, because shadows require light to exist, and the light is still yours. Your mindset doesn't need to be revealed to be real. You carry it like a storm above the clouds, unseen but deeply felt. And when it strikes, it leaves no room for translation, only consequences. They don't stare because you're loud. They stare because they know they missed something. A shift, a withdrawal, a change in rhythm that signaled the end of their access. But you gave no warning. And that silence, that's what haunts them. You let them believe the illusion lasted until it no longer served you. Then you vanished, not physically, but emotionally, energetically. And in your withdrawal, you became mythic, the version of you they never got to decode. Let them chase it. Let them wonder. The mystery is the message, and the silence is the sentence. You never had to hide who you were, only who you were becoming. That distinction matters. You didn't start this journey with secrets. You started with openness that was weaponized. Over time, you learned that survival required selectiveness, that too many open windows invited cold hands, and too many shared thoughts invited warm lies. So you adapted, not by retreating, but by refining. You didn't shut your mind to the world. You just stopped letting the world use your mind as a canvas for their projections. Now you think like a lock with a changing code. They try to enter with old keys, only to find their confidence swallowed by rejection. And the deeper truth? You don't even change the code intentionally. You just evolve so fast, they're always showing up late to a version of you that no longer exists. They're waiting for you to explain, to confess, to clarify the shift. But clarity requires trust, and you've learned how little of that ever really existed. What you once called connection, you now understand, was transaction. They listened only to answer. They showed up only to guide you back to their comfort. Your complexity was always something they hoped to simplify, but now your mindset doesn't accommodate their limits. You outgrew the conversations that start with, "Let me tell you what I think you should do." And that growth, that's the invisible line they trip over, because your silence isn't a protest, it's a filtration system. Every person still demanding an explanation reveals they were never listening to understand, only listening to control. And you've stopped performing for people who confuse guidance with domination. You move like a question now, not a threat, an unknown. And unknowns are dangerous to people who live off emotional predictability. They don't just want access, they want anchors, labels, predictable feedback loops. You broke that loop with subtlety. No announcement, no rage, no rebellion. Just a redirection of your attention, a recalibration of your presence. You now walk into rooms and make the loudest people uncomfortable, not by challenging them, but by not participating. You don't need to speak to make them rethink every word they've ever said to you, because the truth sits heavy on their own conscience. You just let them hear it echo without interruption. They want you back, not because they miss you, but because they miss the version of you they could interpret, they could guilt, convince, decode. That version of you handed out transparency like a peace offering. This version sits still with a loaded mind and no intent to translate. They try to charm you into vulnerability, try to coax your thoughts into the open. But you've learned, the more you reveal, the more they reshape. So now you speak in riddles, not to confuse, but to conserve. Because mystery doesn't mean you're hiding. It means you're protecting the parts of yourself they never earned the right to access. You're not a puzzle. You're a fortress. And fortresses aren't built to be admired. They're built to be impenetrable. Let them circle the perimeter. Let them press their ears against the gates. The silence they hear is not absence. It's strategy. You've chosen to be less visible, not because you have less to say, but because you finally realize the danger of being understood by the wrong people. Your mind still burns, still builds, still stretches to impossible places. But now, it does so privately, not from fear, but from sovereignty. And when they ask why you changed, let your eyes do what your words no longer need to. Say everything without revealing a single thing. You don't announce your intentions anymore. That's the first shift they noticed. You're not quieter. You're more deliberate. You no longer fill the air with updates, explanations, emotional weather forecasts. Your mindset became an atmosphere, unreadable, electric, dense, with unspoken intent. And that disturbs people, because in a world obsessed with broadcasting thoughts, your silence is interpreted as a threat. They can't locate you in their mental maps anymore. You once narrated your struggle, gave them a seat at your internal table. Now, you've sealed the room. And when the door shuts, those left outside start to panic. Not because they're locked out, but because you no longer need them in. They were addicted to your transparency, conditioned to your openness. They got used to the luxury of reading your fears before you even voiced them. They mistook your vulnerability for submission. Every sigh, every confession, every pause was ammunition for them to store, categorize, and manipulate. But the game changed. You realized the more they knew, the more they controlled. So you withdrew, not in presence, but in access. And when you did, their grip began to slip. Because, without intel, their tactics fell apart. You became unreadable, not because you hid, but because you transcended the need to be seen in ways they could use. You don't explain your boundaries now. You enforce them, quietly, brutally, with calm detachment. That's what makes your mystery lethal. It doesn't come with a warning. It arrives wrapped in politeness, in eye contact, in civil tones that offer no emotional breadcrumbs. And that lack of explanation, it eats away at them. They want to know why. They demand context. But you've outgrown the urge to educate people who were never trying to understand you in the first place. You stopped offering the blueprint. Now, all they have is the result. And the result is terrifying to anyone who built their identity around your predictability. People equate openness with connection. They believe they deserve to know your thought process because they once heard your pain. But you learned something from every time they turned your honesty into a weapon. Intimacy is not a right. It's a privilege. And when you pulled back the curtains, they applauded your courage until they realized they could use it to rearrange you. Now, your silence feels like defiance, but it's not. It's evolution. You are no longer available for dissection. Your mind is a labyrinth without a map. You made it that way, on purpose. They try to provoke a reaction. They crave evidence that your silence is performative, that you're sulking, that you're still emotionally accessible, even if you're physically distant. But you give them nothing. No tells, no contradictions, just clarity masked in enigma. And it drives them insane, because in your stillness, you've become untouchable. They don't know how to comfort you, control you, challenge you, or replace you. And that inability to define you has become the shadow they can't outrun. You've turned absence of expression into a psychological stronghold. They can knock, but you've removed the doorknob entirely. You used to break your thoughts into digestible pieces, make your complexity palatable. Now, you let your mind remain untranslatable. They ask, "What are you thinking?" And you smile. Not because you're hiding, but because you finally understand the value of being unreadable. Let them wonder. Let them assume. Assumptions are where weak strategies are born, and nothing gives you more leverage than being underestimated by someone who thinks they know how you think. Your silence makes them loud. Your distance makes them desperate. And your refusal to play the same emotional game exposes how scripted their every move truly was. You no longer bleed in front of wolves. That's the simplest truth. You learned how to suffer without performing it, how to heal without broadcasting it, how to evolve in silence so thoroughly that even those closest to you couldn't trace the transformation. And that invisibility, that's your power now. Because when people can't label your thoughts, they can't sabotage them. You've denied them the very thing they need to hold influence over you: access. And in doing so, you've rewired the entire relationship dynamic. You're no longer reacting. You're studying, strategizing, and they're unraveling, one assumption at a time. They once believed they had insight into your psychology, that your expressions, your tone, your phrasing gave away your internal world. But now your face is a cipher. Your presence is neutral, not cold, controlled, not absent, measured. You've mastered the art of giving just enough to maintain curiosity, but never enough to satisfy control. You're a closed book, surrounded by readers who've convinced themselves they already know the ending. And when they finally turn the page and realize it's blank, that's when panic sets in.